Hi, everyone. Good afternoon. Welcome to another Winsor & Newton watercolor class with Shalene Louise. She will be leading the class today and painting a lovely magnolia. So I'm going to wait a little bit for the group to join us. Give me a shout out. Let me know where you're from. I see we had many people that enrolled in this class, and we're really excited because Shalene's going to be back in another 2 weeks as well with another class for us. So, you know, we're really happy that you're enjoying the classes. We love when you participate. All right, we have got some great, okay, Pennsylvania, Florida, Michigan, Oklahoma. All right, as people are coming in, I'm going to hand this off. My name is Jeannie Breedy. I am a marketing director with Winsor & Newton, and I'm very happy to introduce Shalene today, who will be painting a magnolia using Winsor & Newton Cotman watercolors. So why don't you take it away?
All right. Hello, everybody. I am Shalene Louise, and I am a botanical watercolor painter from New Mexico. This is my 5th class teaching with Michael's Winsor & Newton. And it's always a huge honor and privilege to be here. So if you've taken a class with me before, welcome back. And if you're new, welcome. In this class, we're going to be doing a magnolia painting. So my light is a little funny in here today, but hopefully you can get a good feel of what your finished product will look like. So painting white florals on white watercolor paper is a little bit tricky. It takes slowing down, being a little more meticulous, and the main objective, the main trick here is that we don't want to go too dark too quickly, because it's kind of easy for when you're trying to create white flowers to just end up making it kind of gray, and we don't want to do that. So we're going to work slowly, but we're definitely going to need all the time we can get today. So stick with me. Let's see what we can do in 1 hour. So if we want to switch to overhead view, I'm going to talk you through some supplies and then we'll get started. So, all right, so as Jeannie mentioned, we're using Winsor & Newton Cotman colors today. I have with me the Pocket Palette set. It has 12 different colors. I'm only going to be using sap green, burnt sienna, yellow ochre. I think I'm using ultramarine blue and sap green. And I have a few of them squeezed out here on my palette from paint tubes. I like to use both paint tubes and paint palettes. Just kind of depends on the day. I'm using, these are the Cotman round brushes. I think I said in this class I'd be using a size 6 and a size 3. So get rid of those two. Size 6, size 3 round brushes from Cotman, center it, Cotman, Winsor & Newton, okay? So we got one larger brush and one smaller brush. I'm using Winsor & Newton's Cotman, not Cotman, but Winsor & Newton's just regular watercolor paper. This is from a 10 by 14 pad of paper I have here. I actually just tore it in half, so now it is 10 by 7. Besides that, I'm just going to use a basic number 2 pencil for my sketch. And I have a little eraser nub, and I think that's all. Got a little paper towel, or a towel here for blotting, water for mixing, and I have a sketch here. So you should have probably gotten this sketch in your email. And so some of you have probably already sketched it ahead of time, which is great. But if you didn't, also totally fine. I'm going to walk you through this sketch. And the sketch is very important. We want to take our time here, get the sketch right. So I'm going to start by just kind of referencing this one here. I'm going to start by just kind of getting a loose circular shape here, about the size of a cookie, depending how big your cookies are. Mine are big. So maybe a little bit bigger. And I kind of do this loose circle thing just to kind of place it. I don't know, it kind of helps me, because then once you start drawing the details, you can't move it over. All right, so that placement feels pretty good. I might make it a little bit larger. Okay, So now I'm going to start with the center stamen. So kind of right in the center here, just kind of creating this sort of circular, but it kind of has a point at the top, kind of the shape of maybe like a candle, maybe candle flame. I don't know. Little point at the top. Okay, so I'm going to just work my way around here and draw these petals. I'll start with this petal here that's just to the right. So it kind of goes up, wraps back around. You'll see that a lot of these petals I drew have a fold, which I feel like is a very distinct trait of magnolia petals. They always kind of have a lot of nice, beautiful folds and ripples to them. Okay, so that one feels pretty good. Keep my eraser handy. I do want to erase any unnecessary lines because this flower is going to be white. It's just kind of better to have the less pencil markings underneath, probably the better for this one. If it was going to be a darker flower, it wouldn't matter as much, but okay, let's go over to this petal that's just sort of right on top. Get that shape there. And then I'm going to do this one little teeny petal that's kind of folding back in towards the center. This one has kind of a funkier shape. And then be sure to draw these little, these little lines here. See how there's a little fold right there. Okay, I'm working on this larger petal back behind those two. Let's get this giant petal that's behind all of them. And if you don't want to do as many petals as I am, you can definitely simplify it. It is, I don't know how many magnolia, I don't know how many petals they typically have, but it doesn't matter too much. All right, working on this petal over here to the left. Let's do this one right here. I kind of prefer to work on the ones that are closer to the center. I probably should do that instead of working on any of the outer ones right now. But let's do this one right here. So it kind of goes up, wraps back around all the way to the center, and then it has that little fold, that little petal curve right there, okay? Let's do this petal here, the one on the very bottom, which points back in towards itself. All right, we've got two more. And then we have one large one back here. Okay, so once you do that, you go and, well, one last detail, I'll go and draw these lines in the stamen on this little center spot there. And then I'm going to take a second and I'm going to erase any unnecessary pencil lines. As I mentioned, especially on the face of the flower, I just don't want there to be any unnecessary pencil markings. So kind of have just what you need there as a reference. I kind of made a mess of mine with all those little pencil marks at the beginning, but no worries, it comes off really easily. Once there's paint on your paper, it is a little harder to erase, depending on what type of pencil you're using. Okay. I think this one petal needs to go down a bit further, so I'm going to just adjust that. This is the only chance to do this, so make sure your sketch feels good. I like to use an F pencil for my watercolor paintings typically, but F pencils are very, very, they're very light. And so if I were using my F pencil right now, this sketch that I'm demonstrating would be a little bit harder to see. So for your sake, I'm using the number 2 pencil, but an F pencil is a really great option. I'm just tracing a few spots so you can really see those details. Make sure you get those little folds in there, okay? All right, so let's move on to the leaves, okay? So I'm gonna start back here at this top leaf. Notice it has a fold in it. And also notice that magnolia leaves, they're kind of wavy. The edges have a nice wave to them. Okay, they're not just a kind of flat, simple shape. They have that really nice movement to them. Actually, I did that one in the wrong spot. So I'm gonna do this outer line one more time. Okay, give that outer edge just a little bit of a wave. All right, working on this petal right here, down towards the bottom. And then I also want you to draw the center vein of these leaves and then the little veins that are kind of reaching out. Just a couple more. And you'll notice this leaf here has a couple of little ruffled edges. Magnolia leaves have green on the top and brown underneath the bottom. So I kind of wanted to have those little folds in there so we could show all the beautiful colors of the magnolia leaves. Okay, so this one over here on the end has the biggest fold. And then go and draw a line underneath that bottom edge. And let's just go and draw some little veins reaching out. And then the last leaf I'm going to do is one that is very simple, little leaf back there that is maybe not fully opened because I'm going to make that one just pure orange. So it looks like it's just the back side of the leaf. All right, I'm drawing my stem. And then we are about ready to start painting. The best part. Okay, so I'm going to use my round 6 brush. And I'm just going to get that brush wet. And I'm actually going to just grab some Chinese white from my pocket palette here. And it's very subtle. Okay, this color is so subtle, but it does give it a very soft, like kind of velvety cream, very faint color. So I'm gonna just go ahead and cover all of the petals with this color. And it might even be hard to see on the camera what difference this is really making, especially because I'm just using my phone camera. I guess you can see a little, but go ahead and just cover all of your petals with this Chinese white or whatever white you have.
So Shalene, you're demonstrating the white on white, which was part of the class because you did think that this was going to be a bit challenging, but something it's new. It's something that if you haven't done this before. Now, are you going right over all the pencil lines as well?
I sure am. Yep, I'm just covering all of it. And this is going to be, honestly, this is not going to do a whole lot. Like I said, it's just a very soft, beautiful base, but we're going to be adding a lot more to it. I'll pull this in frame so you can see the difference of color ultimately that we're going to get to. And so we have to do that by mixing other colors and doing a very translucent, watery layers. We build our layers very slowly with a very watery mix of color. And as I mentioned, the trick with white is you just got to go slow. Don't add dark color too quickly. Lift it up when you need to. yet. So we'll let this dry for just a moment here. It's so light that I'm unsure which ones I painted already. I have to see which ones look wet. I can tell though that is a really beautiful, soft, very pale, almost creamy white color, kind of an antique white. All right, so we'll let that dry. And then let's get another color mixed here. Let's do, so for these classes, if you had like all the time in the world, you could just let that dry and then work on the leaves. But as you know, we're just kind of moving through. I'm going to work on an area that is not touching the petals because I don't want there to be any bleed today. Okay, so we're going to do the stem. I'm going to use some burnt sienna, which is probably my favorite paint color. I use it for so much. Just a beautiful reddish yellow brown color. Okay, so get a good mixture of burnt sienna. And then I'm going to grab just a tiny bit of sap green to desaturate it a bit and make it more of a brown. Takes me a minute to get my colors mixed. This color doesn't seem to want to move super quickly from these little squeezed spots. But I really do want it to be a pretty dark, pretty rich brown color. So it's much heavier on the burnt sienna, very light on the sap green. The sap green is just adding just a tiny bit of brown. And then I'm just going to kind of dab it along the stem. I'm going to blot it a little bit. Just going to use my damp brush to kind of just lightly move that color around a bit. I want it to look a little bit blotchy because stems are a little bit blotchy in real life. They're not just like a solid brown, you know, they kind of have some variation.
Shalene, I got a couple questions. You know, you're going at a good pace. A couple things. Shalene's using a Cotman brush. It's number 6. The color that you're using is, I believe what for the stem?
Burnt sienna.
Burnt sienna.
Burnt sienna and a tiny bit of sap green. If you just have a brown, if you have a brown on your palette, you can just use that.
Right.
I make things complicated, but I like to mix my own colors.
That's true. You do have a tendency to use particular colors. So that's your thing and it works for you. So let's keep it going. So I know we're going to keep here. I see a lot of people are painting, so please paint along if you can, but we don't want to stress anybody out because all of this is being recorded and you can always go back to it and it'll be available in 24 hours at michaels.com/classes, which I'll put in the feed. So this should just be a relaxing session and follow along. And like I said, improvise and just see, like she's mentioning,
Absolutely.
If you don't have the color, go with it. So
absolutely. If I always want to encourage people, no, don't feel overwhelmed. There's going to be a recording. And if you get a little bit behind, you just go at your own pace. No pressure to keep up with me here. Okay, so I'm doing a little mixture here of burnt sienna. Okay, just pure burnt sienna. I'm still using my size 6. Debating if I should switch brushes. I'm going to switch brushes. I'm switching to my smaller brush, my size 3 round. Okay, and I'm going to this is just pure burnt sienna. I just want a nice kind of rusty orange color. And I'm going to, I'll go and start up here. I'm going to drop just this pure burnt sienna on the parts of the leaves that are turning. Okay, so if you're seeing the underside of a leaf, let's make it kind of orangey colored. No mixing here, we're just using pure burnt sienna. Sometimes I overcomplicate things and mix colors so much, and then when I just use the pure form of a color, I'm always surprised. I'm like, oh, that works too. Just depends on the day, depends on the mood. I like to make my colors pretty desaturated, and I think mixing a lot of colors kind of helps me get to that more muted palette that I really, really love. Okay, so after I do that, I'm going to do just this top leaf back here. I'm going to paint all of it that orange color. Okay. And if your petals are still drying at all, just come right next to the petals, but don't touch them. Because if you get this orange next to the drying white color, they're going to start bleeding into each other. We don't necessarily want orange petals. So just be mindful of that. But if it does start to bleed though, if you do see a little bit of bleed, grab a paper towel super quick and you can just dab that color right out of the white, okay? So shouldn't be, you know, damage that's too difficult to fix. I'm dropping a little more of that burnt sienna on each side. And that feels good to me. Okay, so my next step, I'm going to do the stamen, the very center of our flower. And I'm going to just use this color I really love called Yellow Ochre. Here it is in tube form. Yellow Ochre. The Cotman version of that color. So it's a little bit more affordable than the professional series, which I really love because the quality is still definitely there. And let's just go ahead and cover that entire stamen with Yellow Ochre. If you have a different yellow, if you have cadmium yellow or lemon yellow, that's totally fine. Yellow Ochre is a bit more of a desaturated color, actually. It's a little warmer.
Hi, Shalene. Question for you. So the stem you had, people are just following along. I'm just putting it in the chat. You started with some burnt sienna and you mixed in some sap green. And then the some of those tips that you were putting, those leaves,
yes.
Because right now you're in the stamen, which is going to be Yellow Ochre, but the color that you referenced, that one.
For the leaves, it's just pure burnt sienna.
Burnt sienna. Okay.
Yeah. So burnt sienna, Yellow Ochre.
Okay. Very good. Thank you.
Okay, guys, I'm going to do the leaves now. I'm going to do the lightest layer of color on our leaves. So I want to do just sap green and Yellow Ochre. I like mixing colors. I want it to be a very light, kind of more warm yellow. So it's a little desaturated here. So Yellow Ochre and sap green. It's going to give you a very beautiful yellowy green color. And once you have that color mixed, make sure you got a good amount going. You can grab more water if you need to, make it a nice puddle, nice watery puddle of yellow and green. And then let's go ahead and just drop that color. This is called a wet on dry technique. So the paper is dry, but my brush is wet with paint. So wet on dry paper. And I actually just reached my green into my petal just a tiny bit. So just lift it right out with my paper towel. And I'm just going to cover the face of all of these leaves. You want to probably switch to your larger brush here. I'm using my size 6 brush, and using the smaller brush is fine, but it's just going to take you a lot more time. You can cover a lot more square footage or square inches square inchage really quickly on your paper if you're using a larger brush. And because we're not doing anything too detailed right now, it's definitely fine to use the larger brush. When I do more detailed bits of painting, I will use a smaller brush typically. And if your paint starts to kind of stop and start, if it looks kind of splotchy, you just need more water on your brush, okay? So just grab more water as you need it. Keep that mixture nice and watery, nice and flowy. your larger brush should hold a good amount of water. So you don't have to go back to the palette as often as when you're using a small brush. You have to kind of back and forth, really, you know, every couple drops of paint. I'm using this paper that I'm using today is called Cold Press. There's another type of watercolor paper called Hot Press. That is actually smoother. Cold Press has a really nice kind of rough texture to it. And that rough texture, it'll actually make painting a little bit slower. When you have really smooth paper, paint will just flow really quickly. But cold press, that beautiful kind of rough texture, it typically helps to have a little more water in your brush when you do a cold press paper. All right, let's go to the best part, the part we've all been waiting for. Let's start working on our petals. So I'm just clearing a little bit of room on my palette. Maybe a little wasteful, but that's okay. I'm going to get some ultramarine blue and I'm going to bring it to my palette. And I'm going to grab about an equal amount, maybe a little bit less of burnt sienna, which I could have grabbed from right there, but that's okay. So burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. If you don't have ultramarine, you can use phthalo blue, intense blue, Winsor blue, any blue. It's going to be such a faint mix of color that it doesn't even really matter. We're going to use the tiniest bit of blue anyways. So I'm bringing a bunch of water to my palette. I want this to be so watery and so faint. So that's burnt sienna and blue. And let me tell you a little bit of color theory really quickly. Burnt sienna is essentially yellow and red, and blue is blue. So if you know anything about your primary colors, when you mix the three primary colors, which we are essentially doing, yellow, red, and then blue, you're going to kind of cancel, all three colors kind of cancel each other out. So you should end up with a kind of a gray color. I don't know if you've heard that if you mix all the colors together, you get black. So we're kind of getting something like that. It's kind of a grayish color. Like I said, mine is a little bit heavier on the blue side.
So you're really diluting it down to get that.
Yeah. So faint, right. So faint.
Yes.
Like I said, I don't want to go too dark too quickly. So your mixture should look, you know, kind of grayish, not too green. If it's looking too green, you have too much of the other color of the burnt sienna. But let's make it a little more blue. All right, so once you have a really watery mixture, we are going to, let's start, and it should be totally dry here. Let's start with just one petal at a time. Let's start with this top petal that is just above the stamen. I'm going to drop some color there. And I'm actually going to clean that same brush off. This is the size 6 brush, cleaning it off. Now it is just a damp brush, damp, clean brush. I'm going to hold this in one hand. So now I'm going to just lift out a tiny bit of that color, gently smoothing it upwards. But if I find that I have too much paint on my petal, I'm just blotting it right here on my paper towel because I don't want to use all the color here just because I dropped it. I'm doing this with a lot of control, okay? So I'm not dropping too much paint at once. Okay, now I'm going to switch to my size 3 brush. Where are you? Okay. Let's grab some more of that mixture and let's go to this petal. We'll go to the one right next to it. Drop some color and then use your larger brush to smooth it out just a little bit. If you need to lift out color and blot it on a paper towel, that's great too. This is looking faint and just the way I want it to look. So I'm happy with that. And you can probably tell in the video, it maybe is a little easier for me to see, but you can probably tell in the video that that color is starting to look different, right? Just a little bit darker. So let's keep this edge of these, keep the edges of all of the, you know, where all of the petals turn. Keep your edges very, very light. And we'll just make the inner parts of the petals darker.
Hey, Shailene, I just want to give everybody an update that right now we are recording. And like I said, I don't want everyone to fret over this and to take their time. I'm trying to put as many of the color combinations that Shailene is using in the chat, but she's been repeating them, which is great. This will be recorded and available in 24 to 48 hours on the Michaels homepage. It's michaels.com/classes. If you go to the top where you registered for the class, it'll take you to the same place. And then what it'll direct you to is the Michaels YouTube channel. So when you go there, you can find those videos there as well.
I also have a story highlight on my Instagram, which you can find from right there. I have a story highlight on my page where I have the last 4 classes that I did. I have all 4 of them highlighted if you want to go back and watch some of the other ones. We have a poppy class, a pumpkin class. We did a rosebud and a sunflower. Surprised I remembered all those. And now we have a magnolia one. And at the end of this video, I'm going to show you a little sneak peek of our next painting.
Right, which is, we're really excited about that one because it's more seasonal. And I will provide the link for that as well. The class is already available for booking. So we hope to see many of you back for the class as well. So I see a lot of people are painting along, which is fantastic. I'm really happy to see that.
Awesome.
And it's very relaxing. As Shailene mentioned, we would love to hear from you on her Instagram. And then when you're done with your beautiful magnolia creation, we'd like for you to post it at hashtag Make It With Michaels, also hashtag Michaels Classes, and then also at Winsor and Newton. So there's lots of, we'd love to share and hear from you so that we could get feedback so we can continue to give you these classes that everyone seems to be enjoying.
All right,
now,
so
we just got a question, Shailene, pardon me. That someone is saying, what if it's coming out too dark? You know, if it looks too dark or, you know.
Yeah.
So how would you suggest?
Just say, if it's not too late, if it's still wet, you can blot it with a paper towel and lift some of that dark color out. You really, really, really want to make sure that your mixture over here is super, super watery, okay? That's kind of the trick to having really light color over here. But if it's too dark, you just take your paper towel and see if you can't lift out some of that color, okay? And I'm actually able to lift out a little bit of mine, so hopefully you are too. And I live in New Mexico where paint dries very fast. It is so dry here. It's kind of tricky with my palettes because my palettes, if I give it like 3 minutes, my palette is just like totally dry. Okay, so I'm going to leave that for a moment and I'm going to go over to the leaves. If you're still working on it, you keep doing what you're doing. But I'm just want to make sure I'm making good time here. So I'm going to make a mixture here on my palette of sap green and my favorite color, burnt sienna. Burnt sienna is kind of the star of the show for this class. So burnt sienna and sap green, probably mostly green. If you mix it too 50-50, you know, it's going to probably look brown, and I don't want brown leaves, not on the top side anyways. So get a nice green mixture going over here. And then once you're happy with it, let's go ahead and I'm going to drop some color over here on this furthest leaf over. So drop some color. And then using that same brush, my size 6, I'm going to smooth that color with a damp, clean brush. So I'm basically dropping color and then using a brush to smooth it out. So I kind of create a nice, soft, natural looking gradient. Hold it up for you so you can see.
That was a great view. I think that really helps when you bring that up to the camera.
Yeah, I'll try and remember to keep doing that for you guys. If it would be helpful, just drop it in the chat.
Yeah,
in case
I'm saying that.
In case I forget. Okay, so I'm going to work on this center one. I'm actually painting just along the right side of that center vein. And actually, let me just show you that really quick. So I didn't actually just trace the line, I traced it just to the right, okay? Just to the right. And then I'm gonna go ahead and just drop paint all along the edge, avoiding the orange though, because I don't wanna paint over the orange underside. But just, you know, as long as we're painting on this part of the leaf, the top side. And I'll go along the left side of this leaf. I'm gonna go along the edge of the flower very carefully. Don't want there to be any bleed. If your flower is still very wet, then be careful. You don't want to touch the green to the leaves, because we also don't want green. We don't want green petals. You don't want to touch the green of the leaves to the white petals. Okay, so now I'm using a damp brush, and I'm going to just softly bring that color out into the rest of the leaf, feathering it out, kind of creating a soft gradient. And even if your paint starts to dry a little bit, which mine is, the green I just painted is already starting to dry, it is totally okay, because if you've got a damp brush, you can kind of use it like a little scrubber, and it kind of lifts up that color, just tells that color, not yet, don't dry yet, don't dry there, dry over here. Okay, so in doing that technique I just did, it kind of makes, you notice how the leaf doesn't look flat now? It doesn't look like a just flat one-dimensional leaf. It looks like it has a little bit of form to it. Like maybe there's a little bit of a roundness here, a little bit of a roundness there. It just looks like it's got more form, more dimension. So by messing with the contrast of colors, the light green versus the dark green, that's how we kind of create form in our leaves or petals or anything we're painting. All right, I'm gonna get a little bit more paint mixed over here because I'm running low. So sap green and burnt sienna. And then I'm gonna do that same technique again. So I'll drop it along the right side of that vein. And then I'm gonna trace along the outer edges of the leaves. You can use your larger brush or your smaller brush for this part, whatever you feel more comfortable with. I'm using the size 6 brush. And I'm just able to hold quite a bit of paint with that. So it's working well for what I'm doing right now. So I just cleaned it off. And now I'm going to use that same brush to do that same technique. Let's just kind of gently feather that color out. And once you get the hang of this technique, I mean, that's a big one to get under your belt. Just understanding that dropping color and then gently smoothing it out. It kind of just teaches you to control your paint. That's how you get some nice detail work with your paintings. All right, so it's the same technique over here. It's a little monotonous, I know. So you drop that paint all along the edge, but make sure you don't paint over your orange underside.
Hey, Shalene, you're making great progress. It's 2:40. The class is scheduled for 1 hour, but if need be, we can run over a little bit. But can you do us a favor? Can you bring up the completed magnolia that you showed us
I
at the
sure
beginning of the
can.
class? Because I think in putting that next to this one that you're working on to give people
Yeah,
some
that's a good idea. It's a good idea.
might be helpful. And then obviously you can see this is because it's fresh, it's wet, it's more saturated. Yeah, so people could see. But every time you do it, you know, it's not an exact science. So like I said, relax and enjoy, you know, making these creations. And you've given so many good tips in terms of how to kind of modify along the way as well.
Yeah. And I mean, you can see even from these two, like Jeannie was just mentioning, it's not an exact science every time. I can tell that my leaves over here, I have more sap green than I did over here on these leaves. And these ones I had more burnt sienna. Like it was kind of more of a half and half. So these leaves look more desaturated. These ones over here that I'm working on today, a little bit more true green, I would say. All right, last leaf. We are doing good. So we follow along the edges, all the way back up in here. And then using a damp, clean brush, feather your color out. You can blot it if you need to. If you have too much paint on your paper, just use a paper towel and just dab that color out. You don't have to use it all just because you put it on the paper.
Shalene, someone's asking, which is kind of interesting, have you ever considered putting this on a colored background? And if you did, would you start with the colored background or would you add in the colored background after you completed the floral?
I mean, only because I would do the color background first, only because I'm scared of ruining it at the end of my painting. Like I'm always scared of like loving a painting and then adding a background and being like, oh, that looks bad now. So that is a trick though, like with painting with watercolor, to use a background when you're painting white flowers is a really great way to create that strong contrast. But I don't often paint backgrounds. I actually do. Actually, I'm looking over at my wall right now. I have a magnolia painting that does have a gray background, kind of a bluish gray background, and it really makes your magnolia pop. So maybe you could do a really dark kind of grayish blue color in the background if you want to.
Yeah, but I thought that
just for the
really pretty for it to create the contrast. And one of the other things that I know we did post this, you know, there's other florals we do as well. Sometimes it was also like that really pale, almost like a blush color. You know, it's like a really neutral. It just has a hint of like pink to it, so that could be actually soothing.
Actually, that would be really pretty. I don't know. I like to do backgrounds sometimes, but sometimes it's fun to just kind of do this as a study. And I think this class is a great example of just doing a study and trying to see if you can just using, you know, the colors you have, try and make your white pop against white, which is really tricky because I mean, that doesn't really pop, but you know, it does a little bit. It doesn't look like the flowers are just the color of the paper, right? So really quick, what I'm doing here is I have a slightly darker mixture. I'm just using a little more paint to drop in just a little bit more of a darker color value in some of these little crevices. So basically underneath the petals, I want my leaves to be a little darker because I want to give the impression that there's a bit of a shadow, that that the magnolia is closer to us and the leaves are further away. So I get that impression by just making just the parts of the leaves that are just behind the petals a little bit darker. And I'll come back and do one more last touch up to the leaves, but for now, I'm going to switch back to petal mode. So let's go back to our mixture over here. Your kind of dark greenish, brownish, gray petal color. And let's do another layer. So I'm going to go ahead and reference this one here. And let's just see where they should be a little darker. Basically, just think about what makes the most sense. Like, where are the petals overlapping? Where does it make sense for them to be a little bit darker? Where would there naturally be a bit more shadow? So you can see I'm painting this back petal right here. It makes sense that would be cast into shadow just a tiny bit more. And I'll gently smooth that color. If I drop too much, I can blot it on my paper towel. I'm going to drop a little bit of color right here along the very edge, the furthest edge of this petal up here. Drop a little bit of color there. I'm going to give this the impression by just dropping that color right there that the petal is folding a little bit, as you can see in this right here. Just notice how adding that tiny bit of dark color, get my brush out of the way, it kind of looks like that petal is folding away. I'm just moving around all these petals and dropping a little bit of color, a little bit more dark color. Do this with a lot of control. If you feel like you're falling behind and you feel tempted to rush, don't. Just go a little slower, build that color very, very slowly. And as I mentioned earlier, make sure to keep these little folds here, make sure to keep those light. As you can see over here, it really adds a lot, keeping those little edges super light. Helps us really create form. Makes that flower pop a little bit. Okay, I'm going to drop even more color in here. Basically, when we get closer towards the center of the flower, that does seem to be where I drop more of the dark color. And the outer edges of the petals are a little bit lighter. And the nice thing about watercolors, you can always kind of, even after the paint has dried a little bit, I love that you're always able to kind of very gently just use the damp brush to sort of reactivate that color and move it around a little bit. And a lot of people actually think watercolor is like the hardest medium to paint with. I actually don't. I think it's very forgiving. I think that you just that ability to kind of come back and reactivate color once it's dried and keep moving it around a bit. Take some practice, but once you get used to that, it's definitely a great little tool to have. Okay, just eyeballing this for one moment. What needs to be darker? I'm gonna let this dry. I'm gonna let this layer dry. I'll go back to my leaves for a minute. So I'm using my smaller brush, the size 3 Cotman. And let's get a mixture of burnt sienna and sap green. And I'm going to just drop that color along the veins of my leaves. So basically just those little veins that were reaching outward. I might even drop a little bit of color underneath these petals just to add even more contrast, just a little more drama. And then I will use my other brush, my size 6 round, to very gently smooth that color out. I don't really like to have hard paint lines in my paintings personally. It's just kind of a personal preference. But I don't really like to have those hard water lines or hard paint lines, whatever you want to call them. So I'm always using a damp brush, excuse me, to kind of reactivate that color and smooth it around a bit. So I'll drop over here. I love this smaller size 3 brush because it has a very fine point. So I'm able to do kind of more detailed bits of work like that. drop a little bit more paint underneath these petals, a little bit more drama. And yeah, if you look at these two paintings, you can see there's quite a bit of difference. It always looks a little different every time I paint it. So if you're working on this today and it's not quite exactly the way you're hoping it would turn out, I would encourage you to watch that replay and give it another try. If you're new to watercolor, this might be a little bit of a tricky painting because, as I mentioned, painting white florals can be a little bit tricky. You don't want to go too dark too quickly, and sometimes it is hard to kind of lift that color. If you add too much darkness, too much of that dark mixture, it honestly can be really hard to get it light again. So we always just want to go slow. Actually, it's funny. I remember the first time I ever painted white flowers. It was a custom wedding bouquet commission I did back in, I don't know, 2016 or something. And the whole bouquet was just entirely white flowers. And I was like, yeah, I can do this. And then I got started and I was like, oh no, this is really hard. And so I remember that painting, I actually did add a background to it because I feel like that's kind of the best trick to make the white really stand out, is to add a background. So whoever asked that was a good question. I'm glad you brought that up. If you feel like your painting is a little bit too light and you're not even able to really get it super dark right now, you can definitely add a background. I would just recommend using a larger brush than probably even the size 6. I would use, I don't know. I don't even know if I have any larger Cotman brushes over here. I have this one here, or wait, let's see. This one here. This is like the flat 13 millimeter. You could use something like that and cover a lot of space really quickly. But home stretch, guys. I'm gonna wrap this up. Okay, so let's do one more kind of pass at the petals themselves. So I'm getting that bluish, brownish mixture here going. So that's burnt sienna and ultramarine blue. So I'm going to try and make this, you can see it, right? It's a nice grayish color over here, bluish gray color. So when you have a lot of that, let's go ahead and drop some really dark color into the spots on this flower where it makes sense for there to be a dark shadow. So basically you see those two petals are like meeting. There's a little shadow back in there. It makes sense for some of these spots to be dark, okay? So I'm just very carefully dropping a little bit of color, and then I'm going to come back and smooth it in just a moment. Just to the spots where it makes sense for there to be a dark shadow, okay?
Hey, Shalene, quick question. The leaves, majority of the leaves, when you're going back and making them darker, you were just using sap green. Oh, your camera.
Looks like my camera just changed. Huh? Whoops!
Yep. Technical difficulty.
Somebody just tried to call me.
Oh, that's funny.
There we go.
Oh, you just gave a sneak peek. I just was going to put it on.
No!
I know, it's funny.
Were you just going to bring it up?
Wait, I don't want to steal. Yeah, this is lovely. This is kind of, so I just want to let you finish off what you're going to do, as you were just using sap green. But right now with those accents, you're going to lighten them up with just.
So what I'm doing right now is this is the ultramarine and burnt sienna. So it's a very dark mixture of those two colors. And now I'm using just my clean damp brush to lift out and lighten. I don't want it to be too dramatic. Actually, it kind of looks like the one I did yesterday is got a little more drama. So drop some color in there. Let's see, what else can I do? this is the part where you kind of try and figure out like, what is done? What point am I good to stop working it? Because this, you know, this is, you want to be careful here. You don't want to overwork it and just keep adding, because then you're going to end up with a pretty grayish, dark magnolia. We don't want that.
Couple questions, Shalene, just because we're going to wrap up shortly. We have someone asking about the pencil marks, if you are in fact going to erase any of them. And then if you could just bring up the picture when you're getting close to, for another close-up, that would help.
Yes.
The
I'm going to hold it up in just one moment here. As far as the pencil markings, for this one, no, because in the next 4 minutes, it won't be totally dry, unfortunately. But I could probably, I wonder if one of these ones I erased already. I can show you, yeah, I did this one yesterday. And those pencil markings are mostly erased. Some of the edges, it was a little bit harder to lift out. But wait till your painting is totally dry before you try and erase, okay? You can end up kind of ripping the paper and ripping off the color. It just will make a total mess if the painting is not totally dry, okay? All right, so I'm gonna work on the last detail here. This is the stamen. So I'm gonna draw some, just using burnt sienna. I'm gonna draw these little lines that are kind of reaching up, just about halfway up the stamen. And then I'm going to draw these kind of little arrow shapes that you can see right here. You can see how there's kind of little points that are kind of, and I guess arrows is probably the best word. So I'm going to paint that on mine. And it doesn't need to be perfect, just some little lines reaching up.
That's really bringing the definition now, because that was one of the last things that popped.
It's kind of the cherry on top.
Yeah.
Very center of the painting. All right, so let me hold this up for you. And I do wish I had time to erase that because I drew my pencil markings very dark today for you to see. Yesterday I didn't draw them nearly as dark, so it doesn't look as dramatic. It looks a little more soft over here.
They look lovely. And look at the difference too. That's what I'm saying. I'm encouraging everyone, you know, it just the dimension, the sizes, obviously it's just, you know.
It's always different, especially drawing freehand.
Can you, I'm going to be just telling everyone, thank you so much. We have kept it on the screen, so it'll be available in the video recording of this class, where you could reach out to Shalene. She would love for you to follow her on Instagram and give her some feedback. She's got some, I hear people are really encouraged by this class, and you've learned so many things and you've given us some wonderful tips. Thank you for that. And then when you're done, we'd love to see your creations. You could post them at the hashtag at Make It With Michaels, also hashtag Michaels Classes, and then you could follow us and give us some feedback as well at Winsor and Newton. And we're going to give you a sneak peek on December 15th. Here we go.
Okay,
and I'm going to put
this in frame. Ready?
Here we go.
Here we go. So we're going to do this amaryllis painting on the 15th. So you should join. It'll be fun. I'm looking forward to it. Very festive.
It is. It's, you know, we said we were going to do something a little holiday inspired, but it's just a lovely flower for those of you, you know, I don't know if it's a regional flower or not, but definitely brings up the holidays. So, you know, it'll be the last class that we're going to have for 2020. I know for many of us, we want 2020 to be behind us. So we'll end with a lovely amaryllis. And I encourage you to just go on the Michaels website and enroll in the classes. And also that there will be a survey that you'll receive after the class in about 24 hours. And that's where we garner the information to continue with these classes and cater to your interests and your needs. Clearly, Shalene has a particular style that you're all enjoying, and we want to keep providing that for you. And thanks to Michaels as well for allowing us to participate in this platform. So thank you everyone for joining. I think we had a very productive class. I'm glad that everyone was here, and thanks Shalene. Why don't you sign us off?
Yep. Thank you guys. I will make sure to add the link for this class to my highlights in my Instagram stories. Okay, so I want everybody to have access to it. I've seen a lot of people mention that in the chat. So awesome. Thank you guys. This was so much fun. I hope I see you in 2 weeks for the Amaryllis class. Bye.